I'm a little bit confused as to the ERG published a paper a while back in 2015 called Change or Go. And in that, you proposed various methods or alternatives for leaving the EU, including being part of the EEA or having a Norway agreement. It seems that at the moment, all these are off the table. You will only be satisfied with some sort of no deal or WTO exit. What has changed?
Well, I didn't put my name to any document in favour of Norway or the EEA. My position has always been very clear that I think we should offer a comprehensive free trade agreement to our former EU partners. I think if that is the only option on the table apart from leaving without one, they would want to sit down and talk about it. And the great joy about that is that if they sit down and talk about it, we can leave on the 29th of March without imposing any new barriers or tariffs on our trade with each other under Article 24 of the GATT, which would give us up to 10 years then to agree all the details of a free trade agreement without imposing new barriers.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That's the obvious way forward.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Redwood, because you yourself and several of your colleagues keep referring to this Article 24 of the GATT agreement, and it's comprehensively been proven to be inaccurate for what you mean it to be, which is this whole idea that we have 10 years to agree a deal. It is not that. The Article 24 is specifically designed for two countries that are in negotiations already, have already agreed the basic terms, and it allows them to trade on those terms until they dot the I's and cross the T's and sign it. And also, more importantly, more importantly, it needs both members to agree that. We can't just do it unilaterally. It would need the EU to do it with us. But we're nowhere near that stage, Mr. Redwood.
Well, I think we are, because we are in the happy position that we already have a tariff-free trading arrangement with the EU, and we would offer them the continuation of tariff-free trade. And various people have drafted a proper legal text based on EU-Canada and EU-Japan, which we know the EU is prepared to accept because they've offered it to those countries with a bit extra on offer if they wish. And as long as they would sit down and talk to us about it, we don't need to impose new barriers on the 30th of March, which would seem to be in both sides' interest. But I fully accept they would need to say yes.
But hi, this is Marcus speaking now. We should explain for listeners, Sir John Redwood's not in the studio. That's why I explained which one of us was speaking. It doesn't seem to me that what you're talking about is likely, that the European Union are likely to accept that. So going on to something else, I was on John Pienaar's show just recently with a deputy editor from The Telegraph who was saying, and she was a no-deal Brexiteer, she was saying we Brexiteers must get much, much better at explaining to people what will be better after we leave with no deal. And I said I couldn't agree more, and then asked her to come up with something, and she didn't have anything. So I'd be curious to know what do you think will be better, say, in the first 5 years, and then maybe going further beyond that? What will improve for people in Britain?
Well, how long have you got? I've just spoken for 45 minutes on that subject in my constituency in a public meeting. First thing is that we would start with a Brexit bonus budget in April. I think now the government has penciled that in if we do leave without signing the withdrawal agreement. And we've got around 12 billion net saving a year which we could spend, or indeed we could say there must be around 39 billion available, which is the Treasury estimate of how much it would cost us in the first 2 or 3 years under the withdrawal agreement they're proposing. And I would propose a series of increases in public expenditure on services.
Sorry, forgive me interrupting. I am genuinely just trying to understand. So those bills, those financial bills, disappear. We don't have to pay those, exactly. So we still have that money. But that's not necessarily, I mean, you described it as a bonus. I mean, it's a bill that we wouldn't have to pay. But as I understand it,
money that the Treasury says they've got in order to send to rich countries in Europe, and I'm saying let's spend it on ourselves, because most people agree right, left and centre. It'd be nice to spend a bit more on our schools and our social care, for example. We found some money now for the health service. That would be great, and I think some tax cuts to give a boost to the economy. We're in a situation at the moment where the continental economies are slowing very badly. Italy in recession, Germany effectively in recession. Look, am I allowed to give you some good news, or are you just going to stop every piece of good news?
I'm trying to understand it.
So then we give a big boost to the economy. I've set out the economic forecasts. It gives you a 1% boost on GDP each year for the next 2 years. and that takes account of some loss of exports, because people are so gloomy about our exports if we go over to WTO, and there would obviously be some tariffs imposed on our food exports, for example, by the European Union. But the great news is most of the things we export to the EU would be tariff-free under the EU schedule, so I don't think you should get too pessimistic about what the export prospects are.
You paint a picture that I don't have the base understanding that you have. I'm not working on this all of the time. You paint a picture that does actually make me feel somewhat optimistic.
Great.
But
we're allowed to be optimistic because our country has made a great decision to be more democratic, more free, and spend our own money on our own priorities.
No, hang on.
Then we would go on to sort out our fishing industry, which has been
a great many people are not optimistic on those terms.
We take back control of our fishing, and we catch more of the fish in our own boats. We build bigger
Mr. Redwood.
Processing industries on shore because we land more of our own fish, and we get a better fishing industry.
Our own fish.
Something similar for the farming industry.
Mr. Redwood, I have to interrupt you just for a second.
Why? Why am I never allowed to set out good news?
You just had an uninterrupted minute of telling us all your good news, but I'm afraid uninterrupted.
There's lots more.
Uninterrupted cannot go unchallenged. And some of the things that you say, you paint a very, very good picture. But for example, the money. Yes, but for example, but now comes the time of accountability. Now comes the time of scrutinizing some of your claims. And I'm afraid that is part of every interview. Some of the money that you say that we're not going to be sending and we're going to be saving, that money allows us to have frictionless trade. That money allows us to be part of agencies that make life easier for us, like the planes flying, the nuclear materials that we need in this country to be able to perform cancer screenings. All that stuff comes with that money. And I'm afraid your claim of saying, well, we don't spend that money, therefore we are richer for it, is somewhat simplistic, because what we give up from that, it's like saying, look, I have a shop and I pay 500 quid a month rent, and through that shop I make my living. Well, if I shut the shop down, yes, I do save £500 on rent every month, which means that I'm £500 richer, but I've also don't have an income. I don't have a job anymore. So it's really simplistic what you're saying, Mr. Redwood, and it has to go challenged.
Your analogy doesn't work, does it? Because it's not a shop.
But
we
Mr.
are
Redwood,
spending a very large sum of money each year to the EU. Some of it we get back in the form of spending in the UK that they determine rather than us. When we're free, we could choose to spend that money.
But we also benefit from frictionless trade, Mr. Redwood.
Am I allowed to answer your questions, or is this just a waste of time? You know, this is always the same.
Oh, stop frilling your petticoats about every time you're challenged on anything.
Shouting at us.
Go on.
For goodness sake.
Well, there is gross money and there is net money. And the gross money includes money sent back to the UK, where when we're free to choose our own priorities, we may spend it that way, we may spend it more efficiently and better. And then there's the net money, which is the money we never get back. That doesn't buy us access to trade. And we have already seen that the EU, of course, has a lot at risk here because they sell us a lot more than we sell them. And so there are already deals in place. It won't be an exit without any deals or agreements at all, to make sure that their planes can fly into London, and in return we get the rights to fly into Frankfurt and Paris. There are already deals to make sure the trucks can flow so that our trucks can drive on their roads and their trucks, rather more numerous, can drive on our roads. We've already seen that the port authorities of both Calais and Dover worked extremely hard because they wish to keep their business. We also know that Antwerp, Rotterdam, Ostend, Zeebrugge would love to take the business off Calais, so competition works and it will keep them honest. I do not see what these costly threats to trade are, nor is current trade with the EU frictionless, because of course it's a VAT border, a currency border, an excise border. Every time you buy or sell something in Europe, you have to fill in a socking great long intrastat declaration form.
But we know all the red tape is going to increase.
With any tariff you needed, it's a very similar kind of information. I don't see what the problem is.
But Mr. Redwood, we know red tape, at least that we know for sure, is going to increase when we drop out of the EU. But look, we can fight.
You have a customs declaration, but you don't have an intrastat declaration. Have you ever filled in an intrastat declaration?
No, I have not.
That's easy or friction-free.
No, I have not. Mr. Redwood, we can argue the ins and outs of the referendum until the cows come home. I think I need to move on to ask you about these three cabinet ministers.
So I'm not allowed to put out any of the other good news that would happen about changing the other policies.
Here's the problem. I'm very, very happy with you putting out as much much good news as you want. But the problem is that every time I try and interrupt you to actually correct some of the stuff that you're telling us, you get very irate. So I suggest we sort of move on to something that is current, because we can argue about the EU referendum, but I think it's fair to say that you and I are not going to agree.
Well, I'm not arguing about a referendum. I'm arguing about what we do
about
next
the benefits.
to maximise the prosperity and freedoms of the British people. And 17.4 million people were very sensible people who fully understood what they were voting
No,
for.
they didn't. That is absolutely demonstrably not the case. Of course it's not the case.
So you're going to insult the 17.4 million?
No, Mr. Edward, quite clearly I'm not going to insult the 17.4 million. Stop fetishising them. Right? It's such a ludicrous thing to say. Lots and lots of people voted, and every single one of us went into the polling booth with a view about the most complicated question we had been asked in the 45 years I've been alive, and a binary question was put to us, which was moronic and dangerous. No, people did not know what they were going to get. And every time you people start representing this falsehood that 17.4 million went in with a full understanding of trade deals and what the future would look like, you tell a massive lie. So stop it.
That we're losing a lot of money under this deal, that we haven't done terribly well out of the single market and customs union.
How can you say that, Mr. Edward?
Remain told them we would be leaving the single market and customs union, and they voted to get their country back and to appoint people to Parliament who can make the decisions for them. And the advantage they have with that is if we make a mess, they can throw us out and choose a better lot, and that is a democratic process.
They could do the same with MEPs.
But they don't control
Which
the
you
whole
know.
show. Everybody is in control, and nobody is in control of the EU. When you look at the Commission, the Council of Ministers, the European Court...
Much the same as the civil service that we have here.
There are so many institutions, many of them not directly accountable to the British electors.
A bit like the House of Lords and the Civil Service. But, Mr. Edward, you just said that we never benefited from the single market. Since 1973, our GDP per capita has risen faster than any G7 country apart from Japan. How can you say that we haven't benefited?
Than before we were in the EEC/EU, and there's been an EU study of this which shows the UK got least advantage out of the single market at all. They think that we got a 1% GDP gain over all the years we were in it, so a fractional small percentage each year. I think it was probably fractionally negative, because we had a very damaged fishing industry, a very damaged farming industry. We lost out
all damaged by Europe.
Competition in areas where they took all the tariffs off, but they did not lower the barriers in business services and financial services and so forth for many years, which is where we had a competitive advantage. So the thing was always asymmetric against us.
Mr. Edward, I'm running out of time, and I do appreciate you giving us your time. But
I'd like to tell your listeners more about what's really going on, instead of having to listen to all these absurd sound bites that we've heard for 3 years.
No, well, I
didn't persuade people in the referendum.
Okay, well, you can maybe do some of that on someone else's watch, but I need to ask you a question that I would like to ask you and for you to answer. One of the problems that we have is accountability and responsibility. So you've got all the sunny uplands that you're telling us about, and who knows, maybe they will come true. What will happen if they don't? Are you prepared to take responsibility? So, for example, we've had Dr. Liam Fox said all these trade deals will be rolled over. I think 4 of them have been rolled over. The rest of them, there were 40. I think we've got 4. A lot of promises have not been kept. I don't want to go into the details, but what I'd like to know is who is going to carry the can if, and I stress if, this does not work out like you are promising to my listeners and you've promised to the people of this country. Who is going to be held responsible?
Well, I haven't made a promise to the people of this country because I'm not in the government, and the British people as a whole take responsibility for the decision to leave. Their government, at the time being, has to take responsibility for how it's handled, and they may handle it well, they may handle it badly. If the government handles it badly, they will undoubtedly be thrown out, and they'll choose a government that can then improve it and change it, which is how our system works. But it will be the government that is accountable as we go forward.
So it's going to be Theresa May and her cabinet that you think is going to be responsible by how things will pan out.
Well,
because what I'm trying to get to is that you seem to have quite a lot of influence on what the cabinet can and cannot do. The ERG have demanded the backstop be taken out of the withdrawal agreement. We all know that's not going to happen. So when it doesn't happen, who are you going to blame?
Well, the ERG group of MPs do think that the current withdrawal agreement is unacceptable, and we were amongst those who voted against it. But remember that the withdrawal agreement went down by a majority of 230 against, and that's rather more than there are ERG members. And it included all of the opposition parties, so it wasn't just us that was against it. And more importantly, it included the DUP, on whose support, of course, the current coalition government entirely rests. So it is good advice from the ERG, from the DUP, and from all the opposition parties that this withdrawal agreement needs substantial amendment. And if it is not amended, then I fear that the government putting it again will get a similar result, that they will continue to lose the withdrawal agreement unless and until it is amended in a way that people think it needs to be.
We had the general election where both parties, Labour and the Tories, went in with a Brexit manifesto. So that was the second Democratic vote.
And in that general election, the majority of people voted for parties that oppose no deal.
Again, Femi, they voted for pro-Brexit parties. And at that point, Femi, can we just clarify, Theresa May was saying very, very clearly, no deal is better than a bad deal.
And she lost her majority on that basis, so there's no mandate for no deal.
Then we have the third Democratic... Then we have the local election result. Then we have yesterday's vote. And I just feel like surely now is the time to accept, Femi. The game is up. The fix is in. So you and the London liberal media elite are never going to accept that the public want Brexit.
I am from Birmingham. I was born in Darlington. Please do not lump me in with the London metropolitan elite. As for the point about democracy, the majority voted for parties that oppose no deal. So what are you saying should happen? If you are saying we should leave the EU without a deal, you're saying we should do something that the majority voted against twice.
That's rubbish.
I just explained why.
You have absolutely no proof that the public voted against a no-deal Brexit.
They voted for parties.
All you know is that they voted for parties that are pro-Brexit. That's all you know.
No. I said that they voted for parties whose manifesto said, we oppose no-deal Brexit.
But a no-deal Brexit, by the way, is not something that the Tory party are saying is something they necessarily want. They're saying it's something that has to be left on the table in negotiations in order to secure a good deal.
The negotiations are over. They've been over for months. So if Boris Johnson gets into power, he will be pushing for no deal. Same with Dominic Raab. That is what will happen. And the majority voted against that. It would be a fundamental democratic travesty if we left the EU without a deal after the majority voted against no deal parties in 2 consecutive elections.
It's a public interest, Kevin. He's the future Prime Minister.
Caring neighbours go to the Guardian.
Because
they don't.
Kevin, you go to the police, and then what you do with the story thereafter, as a member of this country in a free society, is your own affair. And if it involves the Prime Minister of this country, I can't believe you're even going to argue that.
You're going to get investigated.
But that's different from being slandered, run down, diminished, and rubbished. You know, lefty Remainers with a political agenda. There's no evidence of a political agenda. The only evidence is that they were concerned enough to raise the alarm, having gone up and knocked on the door and had no response on 3 occasions.
Are you surprised what happened to them?
I'm disappointed that people who do the right thing are rubbish. No, but that's not to say that we shouldn't stand up and challenge it.
I don't think it is the right thing for a neighbour to take a story to the Guardian.
What, when it involves the future Prime Minister of the country possibly being involved in domestic violence?
You ought to be a little more pleasant to your neighbours. You've called the police.
No, but you're missing out that the neighbour is the future Prime Minister of the country, and therefore there is an overwhelming case of public interest, because the public, including 160,000 members of the Conservative Party, are about to choose whether this person should be our next Prime Minister, and therefore probity would suggest that we should know what this person gets up to at 1 o'clock in the morning when the police are called.
I'm just not saying that all that many neighbours would behave in that way.
Oh, I think with Boris as your neighbour, I think you probably wouldn't you? You wouldn't call the press.
No, I would.
There we go.
There we go. Quid out of it.
Now let's talk to Paul Mason, journalist, and Paul joins us now. Paul, good evening.
Good evening.
I've just been talking to Lloyd Russell Moyle, who is the Labour MP for Brighton Kemp Town, who's been calling for a general strike as a one way to sort this mess out. Do you think it would have any effect?
I think, as a demonstrative act, I think we're going to less like the old-style general strikes. Remember, there was one in 1926, nearly 100 years ago.
I read about it.
Yeah, well, more like more like the kind of thing that's going on in Hong Kong, or was going on, the peaceful mass civil disobedience, when people get denied a basic voice for democracy. I've just been on this big demonstration outside Parliament.
Oh, you're one of them.
Yeah, I was on it.
Made my guests late for the show. It's just not acceptable.
I'm so sorry, actually, because what we tried to explain to people, there was no organisation, but we said, look, be peaceful, don't harass the cops, obey them, leave the journalists alone, and just let's have a big meeting. We did. And what surprised me, I mean, there were Lib Dems, there were Corbynists, there were People's Voters, and there were a lot of ordinary people, including Polish people who live and work here, and also refugees. And the overwhelming sentiment was, I thought this was a democracy.
Well, it is. That's why the referendum voted to leave.
Yeah, but here's a crucial point for your listeners, James. The referendum was a referendum. The will of the people is expressed in our British Constitution, and and embodied in the Queen as the monarch in Parliament. That is the law. The Queen in Parliament expresses the will of the people.
No, she doesn't. The Queen is just there as a figurehead.
No, I'm not using. I'm using the exact words of the British Constitution.
We don't have a constitution. It's not written down.
Well, you may have noticed we've got a thing called the Supreme Court. And when the Supreme Court makes rulings, they become law. The Supreme Court 2 years ago made a ruling that said exactly this. The only will of the people recognised by a British court, and by the police, by the civil service, by the people who enact the laws, is the Queen in Parliament. That's it. I mean, you might not like it. There's lots of people who don't like the Queen, don't like Parliament, and all.
No, I'm a staunch royalist, mate. Listen, I don't like Republicans, but the Queen is not in charge. The Queen does not make the decisions.
No, but what she does is that the sovereign power. So we're talking here about the sovereign power is Parliament,
right.
and that's why the Queen goes every year. That's why they're going to suspend Parliament to reopen it after 5 weeks.
Well, they always do that before a Queen's speech.
No, they don't. You see, and you're a presenter on a public service radio program.
I'm not on a public service radio program.
I'm sorry,
Don't be ridiculous.
This
is a commercial radio station.
Or even commercial radio has a license to be public service. So what I'm about to say to you, James, is very important. You just told a lie, and you need to withdraw it. Yeah, you actually need to withdraw it. This does not always happen.
What was the lie? Because obviously I didn't tell a lie because I'm not aware that it is a lie. I may... No, you listen to me. No, Paul, listen to me. Paul, listen to me. Listen to me, Paul. Paul, you're not... Right, Paul, forget it. Just let's play what Paul said a little earlier on today on Twitter. This is what Paul said on social media.
We need people on the streets, and I don't mean people on the streets like on a classic sort of Remain People's Vote march. I mean like in the poll tax protests. And we need to force Johnson to obey the will of the people, which is expressed in Parliament.
So if anybody's going to apologise, maybe, Mr Mason, you should apologise for that.
I just asked you a question. For what? I mean, I'm calling for people to go on the streets like we did with the poll tax and stop it. I mean, we stopped the poll tax. I mean, this may be ancient history to a lot of young people, but this was one of the worst taxes where you were taxed for...
Do you know, you're very patronising, Paul. You talk down a lot. I'm sure you don't probably mean to do it, but you do talk now. But you're suggesting...
You're a radio so you're being paid for doing this.
But you said the referendum is not a legal thing, but it was handed to them, and that's how our constitution works with precedent. So if it went to court, which is where the president is set, they would probably back that referendum. So it is the British constitution, and it's legal.
The key word that you just came out with, James, there was probably. We don't know. But in any case, the point about British democracy is it sits in Parliament. That's what that weird Gothic building is all about. And there are people
you're doing it again. You're patronising. Listen, you're suggesting people go out on the street and start acting violently.
I think you should come with us as well.
I wouldn't come with you if it was my last breath. You are ridiculous. You are ridiculous, and you're patronising as well.
Thank you for that objective comment. I'm sure your bosses are looking even now at their outcome licence to see whether or not the way you're speaking to me fits what your programme is supposed to do. Now, if you do want to listen to me, I'll tell you what your listeners should be listening to.
I don't want to listen to you. I've curtailed the interview. Thank you very much indeed, Mr Mason. I don't like to be threatened on the air either. I mean, honestly... You know, if you want to have a discussion, we can have a discussion. If you want to have a debate, we can have a debate. But I just don't want to be talked at
Extraordinary scenes last night. Can we just talk first of all about the proroguing of Parliament? Do you think it's a bit bizarre that MPs should claim that it's a shame and hold up signs saying they are silent because they can't, because Parliament is being prorogued, when they're not willing to vote for a general election?
No, it was an unprecedented act of, to be frank, in the words of one Tory MP, tyranny, with an unelected leader shutting down Parliament for 5 weeks to avoid any scrutiny of his actions at a time when we are in a national crisis with the whole future of our country on the line. Boris Johnson is increasingly becoming the Donald Trump of British politics.
Well, okay.
Can I just short of outrage.
I think you've managed to get all of the sound bites out, so well done for you on that. But you say it's an act of tyranny and he's an unelected leader. I mean, I've never voted for the leader of any political party because I've never been a member of a political party. So I've not voted for your leader. You've not voted for the leader of the Conservatives. But if it's an act of tyranny and he's an unelected leader, wouldn't it be a good idea to get him out as soon as possible or allow him to prove that he is representing the British people as he claims he is? In which case, I'm going to throw this idea out here. What about having a general election?
A general election is inevitable, but then what comes first in the national interest is that we have to avoid crashing out of the European Union without a deal. Boris Johnson is hell-bent on doing precisely that. The consequences of that, Julia, would be absolutely catastrophic.
Well, they wouldn't, would they? Even the Bank of England governor, who's been a Ramona to the core, Mark Carney, has admitted that actually with no deal preparations, that's not going to be the case.
Well, with respect, Julia, I know you think you know more about making cars than those who make cars, more about making planes than those who make planes.
No, I don't. I don't pretend that at all.
Ships,
but I do listen to the experts.
Well,
I tell you what, I don't know as much. You don't know as much as the man who's, for instance, running Dover Port.
Are you interviewing yourself?
No, I'm just. You're telling me what I think, and I'm telling you I don't think that.
When you stopped, I'll give you an answer. Is that the unmistakable and overwhelming voice of the world of work, of industry and employment and the trade unions is that a no-deal Brexit would be catastrophic. We are already seeing mounting problems. For example, production in the car industry fell by 10% last month. We have to get a deal. And what we cannot allow Boris Johnson to do is to cut and run, because that would be to betray the national interest. The national interest determines that our focus must be getting a deal on Brexit, and then, of course, we will have a general election.
OK, let's also remember that the same people who are warning of catastrophe now are the same people who warned about catastrophe if we voted for Brexit at all. Any version of Brexit, they said that. However, that is what the British people voted for. You could argue it's in the national interest that we do actually implement democratic votes. You said that there will be a general election. So when are we saying there'll be a general election? Because it looks like if we don't get Parliament back till the 14th of October, and no reason to think that would happen before, we've got the European Council meeting, 19th of October, the Prime Minister is supposed to go to Brussels and say, I want to have an extension unless he's got a deal. No expectation he'll get a deal at this point, given the situation we're in. In which case, the earliest point we can have an election is the 28th of November. Will the Labour Party be voting for a general election at that earliest opportunity?
All parties, opposition parties, have been working together to put the national interest first. What comes first is to stop a no-deal Brexit. There then will be inevitably a general election. We're not going to announce this morning the precise date of that. Instead, what we're focused on are, to be frank, Julia, are the people who get us out of bed in the morning, like in my case, in one of the poorest constituencies in Britain, the Jaguar plant, which has transformed the lives of thousands of workers. And I know what is vital in terms of their interest, because they tell me that the last thing they want is a no deal. And as one of the leading trade union representatives said to me yesterday, Jack, tell them in the House of Commons to stop sodding about and get us a deal, because otherwise it puts us at risk.
And you don't think it'd be a good idea to test what the British people do want by having a general election before October the 30th? And I completely accept the concerns about Boris Johnson shifting the date. If there were a way getting around that, you wouldn't be able to use the Fixed Term Parliament Act motion in that case. But if there were a way, I'm a believer. I would not accept him shifting the date. I think that would be outrageous. If we could actually get a date that was before that time, we could test whether or not the British people do or do not want a no-deal Brexit. Why would you not allow that to happen?
There will be a general election, but you're not listening to what I'm saying.
No, I'm not. You know, I have ears. I can hear what you're saying.
No, well, in the national interest we have to put beyond any doubt that there will not be a no-deal Brexit. It would be utterly responsible and to betray our responsibilities if we were to do anything else bar that. And all you're focused on, Julia, with the greatest of respect, because you're an ardent Brexiteer, and I know you are, all you are focused on is, to be frank, the playing of political games. Well, this is too serious to play politics with.
You don't think we have? You don't think we've been seeing any political games being played by Remainers?
We're going to rule out a no-deal Brexit in the national interest, and then there will be a general election.
Why do you get to decide what the national interest is rather than the British people?
The national interest for me is determined by the people that I represent, and out there in the country, the voice of the world of work, which is absolutely key.
The voice of the world of work.
Britain. The voice of the world of work, yes. All of the employers' organisations, all of the major industrial organisations, and the trade unions all say with the same voice, we cannot have a no-deal Brexit.
Okay, so if you're so sure that the country is with you, go for a general election and prove that, and then make darn sure we don't get a no-deal Brexit by being in government.
There will be a general election. But forgive me if I say this, is that the idea that what we do is to shut down Parliament, then have a general election, and the clock is ticking towards the 31st of October, with the danger that potentially we plunge over into an abyss, to be frank, which make our country poorer for years to come. Yeah. No, Julia. No.
My Ramona bingo card is being ticked off very, very well this morning, I have to say. But the issue is, though, is that you, like many other on the Labour benches and the Liberal Democrats, it's not that you don't want a no-deal Brexit. You don't want Brexit at all to happen. That's the reality. You were elected, though, on a manifesto that said you would implement the Brexit vote. Now, I've looked at that referendum voting slip again and again and again, and I've yet to see the words "with a deal" on it. It says leave and it says remain.
Well, thank you for saying that, because you tell me any one of the major figures in the Leave campaign who ever stalked the country and said leave and leave without a deal. They did not do it. On the contrary, from Boris Johnson downwards, it was said that a good deal would be secured for Britain.
Absolutely. So I agree with you.
The people of Britain, yes, voted to leave. And my very strong view is that we have to do everything possible to meet
Jack Jeremy, on that I agree with you. However, of course, we know that on the Remain side, they made it very clear that we would, in their words, crash out without a deal if we didn't get a good deal. The reality is, of course, very difficult to get a deal when you've got half of the British Parliament working on the side of the EU. Can I ask you also about the Speaker?
Working on the side of the EU?
Yes.
Shame on you. Shame on you.
Jack Jeremy, with all due respect, shame on you and your colleagues. Yesterday...
Shame on you, Julia.
Yes, carry on.
What you are doing is impugning the integrity of MPs.
Oh, absolutely. 100% I'm impugning the integrity of MPs. I'm impugning the integrity of some former cabinet ministers working in the British government who were actually on the side of the EU. Downright I am. And so are many voters listening to this right now.
This morning's story, therefore, is Julia Hartley-Brewer.
No, it's not a story at all.
The arch-Brexiteer is lampooning members of Parliament on the basis of voting with their conscience and in the best interest of their constituents.
You might be voting with your conscience. You're not voting with the manifesto on which you were elected, Jack Jeremy.
The manifesto was to honour the wish of the British people.
To deliver Brexit.
I worked night and day to honour that. But that we have to protect the interests of our country as we leave the European Union.
Okay. I do want to ask you about the Speaker, Jack Jeremy, if I can. You described the Speaker yesterday as one of the finest speakers ever, the finest since 1945, and a decent guy. Can I clarify, is this the same John Bercow who was criticised in a parliamentary report on institutional bullying by Dame Laura Cox? And is it the same one who the former Black Rod, David Leakey, said was unfit for public office and of whom lots of people in his office were terrified? Are you sure that John Bercow is a decent guy and one of the finest speakers ever?
In his role as Speaker, he has been an outstanding champion of Parliament, holding the executive to account. The whole history of speakers, some of whom have lost their heads over the centuries, is that the role of the Speaker is to stand up for Parliament, never to allow government to trample over our democracy. John has done that. He's discharged his responsibilities admirably.
Do you think the role of the Speaker is also to stand up for people who claim they've been bullied or sexually harassed in the House of Commons?
You're asking me about his role as Speaker.
That is one of his roles as Speaker, yes.
I think that there are real problems about the way the Commons conducts itself in terms of investigations into allegations of inappropriate behaviour. I think there's real problems.
And the fact that Dame Laura Cox carried out a report and said he was part of the problem, his office was part of the problem, and that it couldn't be sorted out unless or until his office was changed, i.e. the Speaker left. And you're quite happy for him to stay in that role?
I know you've had your readout from Conservative Central.
I don't get a readout from Conservative Central. Jack Dromey, I have no party political affiliation. I think I probably voted for your political party more often than I voted for any other, actually. So I don't know why you think you know my politics.
Of late, you wear your prejudices on your sleeve.
I'm not prejudiced. I have my own opinions, like voters in this country are allowed to do.
You're asking me about the man as a Speaker holding government to account. He has done that admirably.
So it's okay as long as he holds the government to account. That's it. Then that's fine. It doesn't matter that he allows bullying and harassment of staff, including accusations. He has denied, in fairness, but numerous allegations of bullying and harassment from his own staff. You're quite happy to praise a man as a decent guy, one of the finest speakers ever, who has those accusations against him.
No, I'm not.
You just did.
I repeat, I think there are real problems about the way that the Commons conduct.
So you don't think he's a decent guy?
And there are real problems about the way.
So you don't think he's a decent guy?
I will say it for one final time. In the history of speakers,
is he or is he not a decent guy?
He is in the history of speakers. He is a man who has discharged his responsibilities to this country and to our parliamentary democracy.
Is he or is he not a decent guy?
And you can try all you want.
Is he or is he not a decent guy?
He is a decent man.
You think he's a decent man?
You can try all you want. To take a different view. The view of Boris Johnson, but
it's not the view of Boris Johnson. It's the view of an awful lot of MPs in the House of Commons on many different sides. He's just not. He's been very useful to you, so you're willing to let it go.
There was a time when you were more balanced in your outlook. Now
when I agreed with you.
Now, as an ardent Brexiteer.
That's not an insult, by the way. Do you know that being an ardent Brexiteer isn't actually an insult?
You would push to one side centuries of parliamentary tradition. I will not do that. I am proud to have been elected as a Member of Parliament to stand up for my constituents. I respect their decision to vote to leave. I have worked night and day to secure with others a deal that will protect the British national interest. And forgive me if I say it, but one final time, that is where my focus is.
Okay.
I will never let down the people I represent.
OK, apart from you won't give them a general election. Labour MP Jack Dromey, Shadow Pensions Minister, thank you very much for that.
Withdrawal agreement was just simply a legal text that took us into a
the
transition
European Union
period
say that
in
that's
order
the
to
withdrawal
negotiate
agreement.
a deal. Yeah, but that's when the negotiations start on the future trading relationship. Those negotiations haven't begun. Once you agree a withdrawal agreement,
because Parliament
those
kept rejecting the
negotiations
deal.
begin. Well, there isn't a deal. That's what I'm trying to explain to you.
Well, it's news to me. You're now rewriting history.
I've
now heard everything. I've heard that.
Well,
you are.
This is nonsense.
You're telling me that the withdrawal agreement.
You don't seem to understand what the withdrawal agreement is.
Well, the withdrawal agreement,
which I have read, is 585 pages of legal text, which settles a series of questions about security, data sharing protocols, the divorce bill, and ushers in a transition period in which you start to negotiate Britain's future trading relationship.
Well, I think
with
everybody
the EU.
knows, right, that whether or not you leave with a deal or without a deal, you have to negotiate quite a lot for quite some years to come, and that will always be the case.
Parliament
so the use of language here. So hang on, the use of language here
any say over those negotiations.
This is why people are feeling that as though they've been misled, because you're using parliamentary sort of procedures and parliamentary niceties and parliamentary language to basically get away from the point, which is either you want to leave the European Union or you do not. And now we've got Labour MPs saying, we wish we voted for Theresa May's deal now, and now we'd like to.
I'm sorry, I'm not saying that.
I don't know where you're getting this from. You're the only person sitting in this entire area who thinks you didn't vote down Theresa May's withdrawal agreement.
The withdrawal agreement bill was proposed to Parliament. We never got a vote on it. And that is one of the reasons why Stephen Kinnock and others this week are trying to bring back the withdrawal agreement bill to give Parliament the chance to vote for that for the first time. Theresa May told us she had a withdrawal agreement bill that she was planning to bring before Parliament,
was on TV last
and then
night
she
saying,
resigned.
No, hang on, Ruth Smeeth was on TV last night saying that she regretted voting against Theresa May's withdrawal agreement and would now like to vote for it. So you're telling me that nobody's ever voted for it at all?
We had 3 meaningful votes. That is not a withdrawal agreement bill. The withdrawal agreement bill never came before Parliament. We're trying to bring it before Parliament this week so that we can actually vote for it.
And how would you make that different?
If I could say this, you say that Labour MPs are sitting here trying to use misleading language in order to mislead the public. You keep talking about a deal. We haven't negotiated a deal, and this is part of what is obscuring this for the public. You have to be clear about what has happened here.
So you're going to tell me
not telling the truth.
Well, you're going to tell me. Well, I am telling the truth because that's what I do. What I don't do is obfuscate the truth, which is what you people do.
That's what you've just done. That's exactly what you've just done.
So you're telling me that Theresa May did not go to Brussels.
Telling the public we've got a deal. We haven't started negotiating.
You're telling me Theresa May did not go to Brussels, did not negotiate a deal, did not bring it before Parliament, and it was not voted down 3 times.
She negotiated a withdrawal agreement which settled legal and technical questions and allowed the UK then to go and negotiate a deal. Those negotiations haven't yet started. That is one of the reasons the public are so frustrated. It's one of the reasons I'm so frustrated, and it's one of the reasons that we're trying to bring that withdrawal agreement bill before Parliament for the first time to see if we can get a majority for it, and then allow Parliament and the government to have a role and a say in what those
Why don't
future
you have an
trading
election,
relationship
then you could be in
arrangements look
charge
like.
of the government, and then you could do what you wanted?
Because if we have an election right now, we give Boris Johnson the power to set the date, and if he sets the date for after the 31st of October, we leave the EU with no deal and no arrangements at all.
Well, you say we haven't got a deal now.
Well, we've got a deal because
you just told me we didn't have a deal.
We haven't left the EU yet, so we've got a deal in that we're still technically
You just told me we haven't got a
members
deal.
of the European
you can't
Union.
even have a deal a minute ago and now not have a deal.
I think you're just trying to be difficult, to be honest.
I'm not.
This
I'm
is
just trying to get at the
complete and
truth.
utter nonsense.
I'm just trying to get at the truth.
We haven't left the EU
Right.
yet.
So do we have a deal?
So we haven't negotiated a deal.
You just
no.
said we had a
but
deal.
We're in the EU at the moment.
Yes.
If we leave on the 31st of October, we aren't. I don't really understand what's so difficult about this for you.
Well, it's not me that's
we're
difficult.
leaving the
I
EU
do
on
my
the
job
31st
every
of
day, right?
October.
You guys haven't done your job for 3 years.
Well, this is just complete nonsense because you're not doing your job now. You're pretending to the public that all we're doing in Parliament is running around trying to stop a
and that's
deal.
what they say to me.
We're trying
Because
to agree a
I
deal.
talk to the
That
public
is the
every
purpose.
single day, and that's what they say to me. They're sick to death of politicians arguing over semantics, arguing over little niceties, and making excuses about why we cannot do what they asked you to do, which is to leave the European Union.
And frankly, with media commentary of this level, I'm not surprised that
Really?
they're confused and upset about what's going
so
on.
you think it's our fault now?
I think you're not shedding any light on
I'm
this
trying to get at
process
the truth.
all.
So
All
far,
you're
you've told me 3 different versions of it.
No, it's nonsense. All you're creating is heat rather than light.
Is that
and
right?
actually,
And what are
frankly,
you
at the moment,
creating
that's quite
exactly?
shameful. What we're doing
I
today...
think what you're doing is quite shameful as
we're
well,
doing
but I wouldn't say that to you because I have great respect for the parliamentarians behind me here
Well, it doesn't
who are
sound like
supposed
it,
to be
to be honest.
voted in to do the bidding of the people who voted you in. And
You've
got
just spent 5
two-thirds
minutes saying that we're not
of your
doing our
voters.
jobs and we're letting the
well,
country
you're not,
down.
are you?
And talking absolute nonsense.
To the defence. However, I do think that not knowing what she's named her adopted dog, not knowing what who the godparents are, I don't think that is royal protocol. That is her choice. And it's whether we like it or not, she has got a prerogative. And just because she is a member of the royal family, we still have to remember, her son is the 7th in line to the throne. She's not an immediate kind of,
But you can't have it both ways, Sarah.
Yeah,
You can't have it both
I
ways.
think we can accuse her of double standards.
Let me finish. Whilst you raise all of those issues, I also have to tell you that she's visited girls in India affected by period poverty. This is her charity. She's visited Rwanda to help access to clean water. She speaks of the UN on empowering women and girls. She protests against sexist TV adverts or washing up liquid at the age of 11.
Sarah.
Now, hold on, let me just finish, Eamon.
No, but
so basically, when you also said in your statement that, Harry was right old a bag of laughs before she came along. Now, I'm sorry, but I do feel...
No, I didn't. I said he was the most popular royal before she came along.
Okay, he was the most popular royal, but I still think he's a very popular royal, and I just feel that saying it's because of her that he's losing any popularity. I actually do think that is a bit of a personal attack on her because I actually think this is
that's a
young
fact,
mother.
Sarah.
Why do you think, Sarah, Prince Harry came out and made the statement with wording like, unfortunately, my wife has become one of the latest victims of a British tabloid press that wages campaigns against individuals with no
with no thought about the consequences. Because I mean, can't she speak up for herself? My wife this and my wife that.
Look, you know what? There are many instances where I feel like sometimes it's better for actually my partner who understands my feelings and perhaps can do it in a non-emotional way. He's used to doing this and defending his position. He's been in press before, and it's not the first time that the royals have actually taken legal action against the Mail on Sunday. Prince Charles did it in 2006 when they published...
we're not arguing about that. We're not arguing about that. We're just simply saying... Why are they so self-destructive about their PR? And you said she doesn't. You said she doesn't have to reveal the name of her dog and godparents, whatever. But what I'm saying to you is, why be deliberately obstructive about that sort of thing and then create this?
But my challenge to you is, why not be obstructive? They are private matters for a private couple. And yes, they have public duties, and they do their public duties really, really well. And I do understand that you think, well, they can't have it both ways. But the thing is, if they feel hurt, if they feel that they're being victimised, then they have those feelings are legitimate. And I think they have to be taken seriously.
But surely the most powerful thing, Syra, is to rise above it all, put a smile on your face, be charming, and not say anything at all.
You know, when people have written about me, and I'm nothing near, as globally, famous as they are, I completely put my hand up and admit that one. But you know what? When you do feel that the press are against you, even the people around you say, rise above it. Right? It's not easy to rise above it. Sometimes you want to, lash out. And I think that's a human reaction to do. And they are so global. I tell you something, if my husband felt that I was being vilified and I felt those and he could see it, he would stand up for me. And I think this is a normal marriage at the end of the day, but in a global spotlight.